Presidency has released a report which indicates significant progress in implementing the recommendations of the State Capture Commission. The report has also been submitted to the National Assembly Speaker Thoko Didiza and the NCOP chairperson Refilwe Mtsweni-Tsipane. The report reveals that 48% of the 60 actions identified in the President's response plan have been completed or substantially completed, while more than 20% are on track and just under 30% are delayed but receiving attention. The Presidency says the report indicates progress in the criminal justice system, asset recovery success and institutional reforms to prevent future state capture. President Cyril Ramaphosa says nearly 11 billion rand of stolen public funds have been recovered. Now, to talk to us more about this, we're joined by legal expert Advocate Nosipho Khumalo via video link. Advocate, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us and a warm welcome to the late edition.
Good evening to the viewers and good evening to you, sir.
Now, we've seen the report indicating that 48% of the actions identified in the President's response plan are either completed or substantially completed. Now, from a legal standpoint, Advocate Khumalo, what does substantially completed mean in the context of state reform and accountability?
Well, substantially completed, it means that there is progress in terms of, there are some matters that have been completed. However, there is still a lot that is still to be done. So substantially means that, it's not complete yet. However, we cannot say that there's nothing that has not been done. Something is being done. There is a progress indeed.
All right. And given that nearly 30% of the recommendations are delayed but receiving attention, is there perhaps a legal or a governance concern about prolonged delays in implementation or implementing such structural reforms, especially those tied to law enforcement and procurement oversight?
Well, there is a concern, obviously. However, we have to look at different things that are the cause of that delay. For instance, we look at the fact that, we do not really have much resources. That is the first thing that will definitely be, something that will cause much delay. However, looking at the fact that, 48%, we can say that there is definitely a progress. And on implementation, we're not like just talking about just implementation. There's a lot that has to be done. When you're implementing, you're not just like taking the recommendation as they are and implement. There are some processes that have to be followed. For instance, you have to hire people that will make sure that that implementation takes place, and that on its own, it's costly. I can say that looking at the economy, we have at this point in time, that we are not really, a good economically. We need to hire people like advocates, and there is also another issue in terms of preparing for your case. If the case is referred to court, for instance, there are some procedures that have to be followed in terms of collecting the evidence, making sure that you prepare so that when you go to court, you are confident that you are going to have a successful case against, that a certain individual. For instance, you might have a case against, if it's a criminal case, for instance, you need to prepare a charge sheet, you need to collect evidence, you need to make sure that when you go to court, everything is in order. Otherwise, it's not a matter of just going and implement as it is. It takes a lot, to prepare for a case before you can go to court.
Inasmuch as a commission of inquiry of this nature, all the aspects or the facets of such an inquiry are equally important. But I suppose the key of them, chief among them, is the implementation aspect. But does this implementation rate meet the urgency and the gravitas or the gravity that the Zondo Commission's findings demanded, especially given the billions of rands that have been lost and public trust eroded?
Yes, I would agree that there should be some kind of emergency, to the implementation. However, we have when we're dealing with courts, we're not just talking about, just implementation without following certain procedures. For instance, like I'm saying, you have to collect evidence. The evidence that you get from the Commission of Inquiry is not enough for you to take to court without making sure that your case is well prepared. You've got everything. You have closed all the loopholes, that when you're going to court, you know that you're going to you are very sure that you're going to have a successful case in terms of evidence, in terms of preparing your witnesses as well. And we must look at the fact that, also, the witnesses as well, in this day and age, we can agree to the fact that not everyone is prepared to go and testify, and you need to go and obtain statements to support your case. And then you know that when you go into court, you've got proper statements that have been taken from crucial witnesses, of which some of the witnesses you might find, you might even delay to get some of the witnesses.
Yeah.
It depends on the case. And if it's an internal implementation, for instance, it's much easier. But
Okay.
if it's a court implementation, it gets to be a bit difficult, because there you need to make sure that you prepare your case.
All right.
In terms of witness.
Advocate, we're out of time, unfortunately. Yeah, we're out of time, unfortunately. But just briefly, we've seen also in the report the president citing 11 billion rand in asset recovery. Perhaps you could break down what the legal processes are involved in asset forfeiture, and what barriers typically slow down or even block asset recovery in highly complex corruption cases.
Well, as I've already explained, it's not as easy as it might seem, like when you're reading it, because there are procedures that has to be taken. There are procedures that needs to be followed in every aspect of law. For instance, you cannot just go and forfeit, or you could go and say, I'm going to do a certain, I'm going to take, certain property without following procedures.
Yeah.
So there's applications and applications that needs to be done before you can say that now I'm ready, or now I'm going to have, a successful implementation, especially when it comes to court.
All right,
there are
Advocate.
rules
Yeah.
that have to be followed. There are rules that needs to be followed. It's not a matter of just implementing. Otherwise, it's gonna be futile for you if you just going to ignore the rules and then go to court because, for instance, you want to satisfy, people, or due to time, or due to cost factor.
100%, Advocate. And the Presidency also pointed to institutional reforms to prevent future state capture. And we're still waiting with bated breath to see which reforms, whether in procurement, SOE governance, or even political appointments, and whether these are legally pivotal, but still lacking implementation, just as we've discussed. But great chatting to you, Advocate Khumalo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Well, this report has been tabled before parliamentary leaders Thoko Didiza and Refilwe Mtsweni-Tsipane. And yeah, we're watching with keen interest with regards to what the legal weight or the obligation is on Parliament to act on this progress report, and whether Parliament will summon departments or agencies for poor performance. We're joined by legal expert Advocate Nosipho to discuss this.